Beyond Clean offers a creative look into the inner workings of a healthcare industry committed to getting it right. Every instrument, every time. Join us every week as we explore the hidden world of one of the most important aspects of safe surgical care. And now your hosts, Hank Balch and Justin Poulin.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak with Alison Sonstelie, Supply Chain Manager with Sanford Fargo Medical Center at Sanford Health. Alison has a background in sterile processing management, was part of a department that won the Healthcare Purchasing News Award for Best Department of the Year in 2014, as well as another award that year, which we'll get into with her in just a little bit. 3 segments, Hank, for this week's interview. It's initially kind of talking about Alison's career path, why she got into sterile processing. From there, we'll move into talking about that CS Department of the Year award and some of the things. What did it look like before? What did it look like after? Some of the initiatives. And then her career growth and movement into supply chain challenges, lessons learned, things that she brought with her from sterile processing. I know neither of us has actually ever had a chance to speak with Alison live, so this will be the first time we've ever talked to her. But I know you've networked with her quite a bit online and with LinkedIn, and she's been really very, very interesting person to network with.
Yeah, and I'm excited about the way that we've segmented the show today because this is a story of every technician out there. There's it's a genesis story, if you will, how we stumbled into the sterile processing life and got bit by the bug, if you will. And then along the way, hopefully there's a story about success. It doesn't always rise to the level of a national award, but there is recognition to be had in your own facility with just growth as a professional. But then, as we'll close out today, talking about what career growth looks like, and it doesn't always have to be only in the sterile processing universe. We can we'll talk to Alison today about what that looks like on the supply side. So it should be a very engaging interview, and I can't wait to get to it.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun. We're going to go get Alison right now. Alison, thanks a lot for coming on to the show with us this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
As you may know, we kind of do the show in 3 different segments, and this first segment we really wanted to talk to you, kind of let the listeners get to know you a little bit and some about your career path. And really, I think we'll start with giving us a general sense of what drew you to healthcare and then into the sterile processing profession in particular.
Okay, well, my story starts, it's not like any sort of exciting adventure story where I figure out that I love healthcare, but so when I graduated from college, that was right when Obamacare had gotten passed, and it was really difficult to find full-time employment because, if you were a part-time employee, you didn't have to have benefits offered to you and whatnot. So my best option was to look at, working in the hospital somewhere. So I actually applied to every position on the website for Sanford. I had 3 different interviews. On one of them, they actually took me into the morgue, which wasn't, yeah. So it was kind of crazy. They were bragging to me about the new power bone saw that they'd gotten that year, and I was like, "Oh, great, yeah,
Nice."
So, so it was kind of crazy. And then my last interview was actually with the Sterile Processing Department, and I was offered a job working PMs, and started doing it. And actually, the first 2 weeks, it was basically just putting supplies away from returns from cases, and I was like, oh man, I don't know if I can keep doing this. But after that, it kind of started to grow on me, and I found a lot of things that I really loved about the job. So that kind of kept me going, and it made me more interested in everything that goes on in the hospital, and, because it's kind of like those departments, the service departments are like the little elves under the stairs that kind of just take care of everything. And if you're just a patient or a visitor at the hospital, you don't really get to see that. So it was kind of cool to get to see kind of the background of the hospital. And, there's just a lot that I really loved about it.
So little did you know, Alison, that after seeing that bone saw in the morgue, you would end up processing saws, maybe not for the morgue, but definitely for the OR. So,
right.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the speed of career growth that you experience, particularly in sterile processing. So you said you graduated college, and then we're looking to step into healthcare, but then you get a position in sterile processing, and to kind of talk us through what your career progression looked like in SPD, and just what motivated you to push so quickly.
Yeah, for sure. So I started out as a Tech 1. So our facility had a really detailed tech progression plan. So there were like 4 different tech levels, 1, 2, 3, 4. There were different support roles like instrument specialists. There were several different supervisor roles. So when you start and you interview and you're hired, it's kind of all laid out for you. Like, here's all your options should you choose to stay and you want to advance. Here's the choices for you. So that was a huge motivating factor, and it made me really engaged to everything that was going on because, I thought, okay, if I stay and I do this, get certified, then I can move on to the next step and then see what happens after that. We also, we always have projects going on, and I always either asked to be a part of projects that were happening or I just kind of found things that I thought needed to be done and probably made a lot of people really crazy in the process of doing that. But I remember one time, the backup instruments, I asked our instrument specialist, is like, hey, I noticed a lot of these look like they need repair. So I went through the whole wall of instruments and came back with 3 buckets of needle holders that needed to go back, and she was just like, oh. Nice. There's a lot of work that you made for me. But, it was, I found a lot of things that, I wanted to be a part of improving the department. And I really wanted to take ownership of a lot of things that were going on. So, just wanting to be part of it actually helped me advance and grow. And, my director, Susan, she saw those qualities. And I'm sure, now that I'm in a leadership role, I appreciate those people that have ideas and bring them forward and, want to improve the department and really buy into everything. So I think that really helped me to advance, was just my eagerness to participate in things.
No, that's a great story, and that's actually when I talk to my technicians, especially the brand new ones coming aboard, and try to lay out, as you said, the plan for growth and what it looks like. Oftentimes there's experience requirements, so we built in certification requirements as well to grow, but the one thing that you can't really put on paper is that eagerness perspective that you talked about, just coming in every day regardless of your title, and it's having eyes for improvement. If it's little, like those needle holders on the backup wall, or perhaps something big like a whole process that needs to be changed. But you're right, as a leader looking out into the department, those people stand out very, very quickly, especially if it's not a one-off, okay, they had a good day, they wanted to do something, but if this is who you are and your personality. So that makes a lot of sense, and hopefully our technicians, listening to this podcast can take that away to their own facilities, because there is never an end to things to fix, improve in your SPD department. So I wanted to get at particularly your involvement with ISHM. So for those of y'all who are not familiar with that acronym, that is the International Association of Healthcare Central Service and Material Management. Why is ISHM important to you, and how has it impacted your career?
Well, first of all, since I moved over to supply chain, I now like to say that I put the in ISHM.
I was going to bring that up. That's a great point.
That's classic.
So, yeah, it's great, huh? So, being in Fargo, North Dakota, we're really isolated geographically. So, like, the next closest large city, which is Minneapolis, is like 3.5, 4 hours away. So, the Minnesota chapter of ISHM is great. Like, they've got events going on all the time, but it's really hard to take the time off and get there with the drive. And it's like that across our state because we've got, Bismarck and all these other isolated places where they're like hours apart. And we did start a chapter in North Dakota, and we're having our first meeting this fall. So there's a lot of people across the state that are excited, that we've got something going on and they can participate in too. So, I really, we weren't all that involved in ISHM, and I wasn't really involved in ISHM until, we won the HPN award in 2014, and then we also that same year won the ISHM Confidence Builder Award. So I got chosen to go and accept those on behalf of our department, and that was really my first experience with all of it. So it was great. I got to spend some time with Dave Ingwall from Bellamed, and he was so kind, and he introduced me to a lot of like the who's who people and helped me make some connections. And then the next year in Fort Lauderdale, I actually got to go on a Bellamed scholarship, and then the year after that in San Antonio, I went on an ASCALAT scholarship. So for the people that might be listening and you want to be involved and you want to go to these types of things, there's scholarships available to do that. So apply if you want to go and get that support to go do that, because it's certainly something that that I did on my own. Otherwise, I would have had to, pay out of pocket to do that stuff. So, but ISHM is great because you go to those things and you get to network and you get to meet people and see all the new products and, just bounce ideas off of each other. And it's so great to meet people and not have to explain what you do for a job for like 10 minutes and then still have them not understand what it is. Like, you do what? You wear what? Plastic suits? You know what I mean? So it's just, it's great to be around like your own kind when you go to those things and be able to learn and develop those connections.
You just mentioned the new chapter. When's your first meeting? There may be people listening that live in the state and want to go.
Yeah, so our first meeting is on September 23rd. It'll be in Fargo, North Dakota. We are sending out some information to all of the ISHM members that are in North Dakota and Minnesota regarding that conference. And it's going to be really cool because we just built a brand new med center that opened July 25th. So we're going to go and do a tour of that department too. It's gorgeous. It's a beautiful department, and really excited to share that with people. So September 23rd in Fargo, and we'll be sending out some info.
That's excellent. Congratulations on the chapter and the new location. I know it can be really difficult sort of setting up for new department, and we could probably and we should, Hank, do a whole podcast on building out a new department and what goes into selecting all the new materials, etc. As we kind of wrap up the first segment, Alison, maybe tell us a little bit about what you think are the biggest challenges to sterile processing departments and professionals today as you see it.
I think one of the biggest challenges is just being an advocate for yourself and for your department. I feel like a lot of people in our industry feel like almost as if they're victims, and it's really difficult to flip that mentality to say, look at all the things that we are able to do throughout the day. And it is really highly skilled, and it's very highly technical work. And just being able to celebrate the daily victories that we have and just being able to raise that stuff up and not feel like, you're just in a big meat grinder every day getting pulverized is huge. And it's hard to get everybody on board with that mentality. And I think another big challenge is just the relationship sometimes people have with the OR, where it's almost as if the sterile processing department is subservient to the OR when really we're partners. So creating more of that partnership between the two departments is a huge challenge, but it's something that needs to be done in order to make the OR successful and make surgical services successful and help really get everyone to the next level of efficiency and teamwork and partnering together to get the stuff done to take care of patients.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that, Allison. That the distinction, I guess, even geographically with the sterile processing departments oftentimes being in the basement beneath the OR, it doesn't help that cultural divide, if you will.
Right.
And I'll never forget the first time I saw a sterile processing department on the same floor as the operating room, actually inside what they call their sterile core. And I was blown away because they treated each other as peers, and there wasn't that communication breakdown just because you're separated by 3, 4, 5 floors. Huge barrier there. So, well,
it's totally different when you can talk to people face to face than just over the phone, I've found too. So, I feel like being face to face and having that interaction is just it's crucial to the success of the department.
So I wanted to ask you one more thing before we transition to talk about the award. You mentioned in your introduction a little bit about your onboarding experience in those first couple of weeks you spent just unloading returns, case card supplies, and it sparked something in my mind about the importance of onboarding. Having been through that yourself, what did you take away from that experience, and then through your transition as an SPD leader as well? How did you ensure that same thing didn't happen to your new hires?
Right. I think there's a couple things. So when you start, it's really nice to have your plan laid out for you, like not so much the career progression plan, but here's how we're going to train you. It's going to take, 6 months. The first month we're going to spend doing case picking or decontam or whatever, and this is who is going to train you, and these are the things you're going to learn. So having like an education person or a supervisor or some sort of kind of support person that can really take that role on for onboarding people and making sure people come into the department and they feel welcomed and appreciated and prepared to be successful is huge. I also think it's important not only to lay that groundwork down, but then also to follow up with them, 30 days after hire, 60 days after hire, just to make sure, they're feeling okay about everything. If they have any questions, you can answer them. So that's one thing we had started doing too, is scheduling like 30, 60, 90-day follow-ups with staff just to make sure that they were, feeling good about everything that was going on.
That's great.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think that communication, you just really described 2 ways to communicate, not only with the OR, but with your new hires to set everybody up for success, Allison. That wraps segment number 1. Some really great insight in there, and I know one of the things you referenced was the awards that you won, and I want to talk a little bit about that with Hank and yourself in segment number 2. So our listeners, sit tight for that. We're going to have segment 2 coming up. All right, now we're back for segment number 2 here on Beyond Clean with Alison Sonstelie. I want to ask you a little bit about these awards because I was aware of the CSSPD Department of the Year award that's given out by Healthcare Purchasing News. But you mentioned in the first segment about the Confidence Builder Award that you also received in 2014 as a department. So maybe, Alison, you can talk a little bit about the Confidence Builder Award and what the criteria is or why you want it. Maybe give our listeners a little bit more information on that one as well as the Department of the Year.
Yeah, sure. So the Confidence Builder Award is one of several awards that ISHM gives out yearly at its national conference. And it's more about, the empowerment of your technicians and your staff. And as I mentioned before, we've got pretty good engagement with our progression plan and opportunities for people to advance. But outside of that, we also did some pretty cool things. Like we had a CSPD council where we kind of organized activities both at work and then outside of work, like different fundraising things. And that was something that I actually got to help facilitate and get that off the ground. So it was a really cool thing. So we included that in our submission. And then we also included some of the different stuff that we do within the department to really lift each other up and recognize each other. And so we ended up winning. But there's several different awards that ISHM does give out every year, like Manager of the Year, Technician of the Year, things like that. It was kind of like we got a little double whammy back in 2014 with that one and with the Department of the Year. So it was a pretty good year for us as far as that goes. But so it was just cool to bring that back to the staff and say, look, we are doing some really cool things here, and you guys are getting recognized for it. So it was nice.
That's fantastic, and you're right. Having laboring on the front lines day after day under deadlines and add-ons and turnarounds, it is great to be able to take a step back and say, someone notices what we're doing, and they notice that we're doing it well. That's just such a great feeling. Obviously, you don't need a national award to do that, but when you get that opportunity, it's just a huge boost for the facility, for your community and region, obviously, but definitely for the team there. So that's a great story. I want to focus in a little bit on the Healthcare Purchasing News Award. So to my knowledge, that is the only industry award specifically for department. So there's awards out there, specifically for the best department, if you will, in a country. There's awards out there for leaders. There's more specific awards maybe for Decontaminator of the Year, Confidence Builder, as you explained there. But what I love about the HPN award is it is a snapshot in time of a 12-month hyperactivity for improvement and growth in a particular department. And having been through that myself at a facility in Kentucky, I know the years building up to that, there's a lot of activity. So it's not just the year that you win that matters. So I thought that it would be beneficial for our listeners maybe to hear from you. What did those pre-award years look like? What were some of the challenges that you were confronting as a department in the build-up to that magical 2014 year?
For sure. And I can speak to a lot of this, but I have to give a little disclaimer that my past director, Susan Pfeiffer, was really the whole the architect of all these things that I'm going to be talking about, and she did such a great job, and I can't say enough good things about her and the work she's done. But the years leading up to that award were, like you said, they're crazy. So we really adopted a philosophy of continuous improvement. And that all started with a huge project that was undertaken to do just-in-time case picking. So not a lot of places do it because, it's scary, and it's you're going from a longer lead time to like a shorter lead time, and being able to satisfy the customer and do that is kind of hard. So, we were picking 24 hours ahead of time for case carts, and then move that down to 4 hours before cut time. And it was a huge improvement for us. We gained so much efficiency, and they were able to satisfy the customer even with a huge cultural pushback. There were lots of statements made by the OR that we're going to kill someone if we do this, which has not happened yet. I mean, they've been doing it for 9 years now, and no one has died because we're picking a case 4 hours ahead of time instead of 24 hours ahead of time.
Hey, that's a great quality metric right there. No one has died.
Yes. Right. So, and it's really it really improved a lot of processes. We have real-time inventory now, and the focus was getting today's work done today. So we're not doing tomorrow's work, and we're not trying to recover from everything that happened yesterday. We're trying to pick the cases for today and then get all the instruments that were used today cleaned, sterilized, ready to go again for tomorrow. So it really laid the groundwork for a lot of other improvement events that took place.
So speaking to the OR's fear, if you will, and that's kind of what it sounded like there, that or something causing them to distrust a 4-hour preparation as opposed to a 22-hour preparation or 24-hour prep. Why do you think, what kind of fed into that fear for the OR? And then how did you earn that back? Because just, changing the process and saying, hey, we're going to do it, in 4 hours now instead of a day, and, trust us and give us a couple of months and it'll be good. I'm sure that's not how it happened. So how did you win that cultural battle to erase the fear and try to get at some of that challenge of trust?
Right. Well, and one thing that also was in our favor is that our department does not directly report to the OR. So we kind of have the freedom to make business decisions on our own without having to be told, yes, you can, or no, you can't do that. So that in itself is huge. But I think, we did a lot of time studies, and, we knew how long it took to pick cases. We knew what kind of inventory levels we had on hand. And we were able to say, we know it takes this long to get this ready, and we will hit this mark. And so what we did was we also captured all those metrics afterwards of, yes, it does take this long. 95% of your cases are ready and complete 3 hours before cut time. We always have instances where there's something that's still in the sterilizer or, little things that happen along the way. But it was actually more reliable than the 24-hour lead time, because if you think about it, you pick a case and it's missing things that are either being assembled or in the sterilizer, and then someone has to go and add it and then record that they added it, and maybe it's still missing something else. You're moving the case cart from here to there all over the place in over an 18-hour period. So it really needs to be babysat, and we didn't have that anymore. So one person was handling it. They could make sure everything was complete, and the OR ended up getting a better product from us. and it was more reliable. So we were able to prove that by capturing those times and how complete the cases were, and they were actually, satisfied with the results. And we like to get really crazy with when we implement things too. So like when we implemented it, it was in like November. So, it's busy. We wanted to do it when it was busy because if it works when it's busy, it'll work when it's slow. And we kind of do that same approach with like other projects that we do too, where a lot of people want to do like a pilot. So we'll just do like one specialty or one unit, but we like to just pull the pin and do really good planning and then just implement house-wide when we do stuff. So, and we're able to show the results by keeping good metrics.
Speaking of metrics, or if you want to say data, I think you brought that up earlier too. What were you using during this time to capture that critical data and metrics that helped tell this story to the OR to convince them that the current state's not okay and the future state actually was much more efficient, like you said? Are you just using tracking systems? Was this manual documentation?
I think it was all manual documentation for the most part. There was a lot of stopwatches that were used, and a lot of paperwork that was kept and recorded and documented. So that's what we used to prove our case, and it was a really effective project. And like I said, it really laid the groundwork for other improvement projects because we were able to show we were successful in doing that, which was a huge, huge project. So it really gained the OR's trust in trying to implement other things that we were working on doing as well.
Oh, that's great. I wanted to bring up, I know we talked a little bit about what the department looked like before its award-winning year. As that year got kicked off, it was the award you got was a 2014 award, but for those who don't know, that's actually looking at the year January 2013 through December 2013. That's what, when you submit your application to healthcare purchasing, they're looking at that 12-month span. I believe the application's due January, February. They take a couple of months to review, and then they announce the winners in May. Was there a particular event or person or product maybe that entered into sterile processing early on in 2013 or maybe late 2012 that really sparked or was the catalyst for this massive change?
Honestly, I can say that, like I said, we were talking about the just-in-time case picking that was implemented in 2009. That sparked a whole bunch of other changes that took place all the way up until that year. And one of the things that Susan was able to get going, and I think the year before that and in that year, was she was able to add on to our career progression plan where she had the ability to add additional support and leadership staff. So by doing that, she was able to align staff and roles to the work that was going on, and this enabled all of these people, like we have a decontam supervisor, so her focus is making our decontam area, state-of-the-art, following all the best practices, doing everything the right way, making sure people are educated. So we had people put into roles that can really propel the department forward and really look at how we can be more efficient and how we can be better and how we can do things so we're setting the bar for the whole industry. And so getting all of these people that are engaged and excited about doing that was probably what was the catalyst for us being able to, showcase that work and then apply for this award. So I think that was probably the biggest contributing factor to that.
You've kind of already answered, I would say, the next question, but I'm gonna ask it in a different way, because the way that you just described all that was a real piece of the humanistic side, right? You got people excited, you got them passionate, and I can only imagine that you also talked about the OR and some of the resistance there, but I'm sure there was internal resistance in the department as well. There were probably some people that you never thought, or maybe not you, but maybe some other people that worked in the department. They never thought, Sally or somebody, John was never ever going to get on board with the changes. They were always going to be sort of a negative Nancy, whatever. I wanted to kind of throw this back at you. What were some of the biggest wins that your team had in that year that led to the award? So you've talked a lot about those improvements and the wins that you got getting objective data, but maybe give us a subjective story, somebody in the department who didn't see the vision that eventually came around. Is there a win sort of in that more human side that you can talk about?
Yeah, so it's just human nature to have people that resist the different changes and stuff that go on. I can talk about a process improvement that we did, which of course was met with some resistance, as it always is, but we were looking at different ways to process all the returns that come back from a completed case. So you get some cases back and there's like one or two things that you have to put away, and then you get some cases back and it's like they didn't even use anything. Like there's 3 case cards here of stuff. Now we have to go through it all and it's all messed up. And so what we had was people that everyone was kind of doing it their own way. Like, I know these items go in this part of the warehouse, so I'm going to keep piling all of these things that go there together, and then I'm going to put them all back when I get to it. And we just had people doing that work a different way. So what we did was we did a huge project where we looked at all of that and then determined that what we needed to do was do it case by case, like how we pick it. And so it was actually reverse case picking. So we didn't have all that batching, and that was met with huge resistance. I know there was one person in particular that, we scan everything out with handhelds, supply-wise, didn't want to do the scanning, thought it was going to take way longer, was just very resistant. And so we actually were able to show him, like, with stopwatches and data and say, look at this is how long it took to do all of these 2 weeks ago. And it was a huge dramatic decrease. And we were able to show him that, and he was shocked and like totally bought into it after that. So as long as, the data doesn't really lie in those situations. So it was really cool to be able to turn, change someone's mind by showing them information, having them do it. And, this is one of those classic, like, veterans that have been there forever, didn't like to change things. So it was a really cool thing.
You spoke about data, and we've, in the very short life of this podcast, had a lot of conversations already about data and gathering data and using the systems, and you did it manually. It just really stresses the importance of providing objective data to help move people. What you did with that one technician is what many people, and I know we'll talk about this in segment number 3 regarding supply chain, but one of the ways to move physicians is a very, very similar strategy. Provide that data and then begin to benchmark and do some things that way to help move quality and efficiency forward in an organization. So just want to commend you for that, because I think that's the best way, is to literally do it and show somebody the impact so that they can see the results. The last thing I want to ask you to wrap up segment number 2 is back to the award, since the segment's really been all about winning the award and the changes that got you there, and maybe inspirational for many of the people that are listening to the show, that yes, you can do this, and these are some of the strategies. But do you think these industry awards are important, and should they even be more important and more recognized in different different avenues, I guess, because you don't always hear about these kinds of awards happening in a facility, right? You see it on the industry, but some facilities do a really great job of doing awards like this internally and recognizing, and then other facilities don't necessarily engage in that practice. So maybe give us an idea of how that continued to motivate the department because they were acknowledged.
Right, and I think that those type of awards are so important because they're just a really great way to like celebrate each other and lift each other up and really, showcase that work. Our surgical services department the year after, they gave out awards for, I can't remember, there was a few different categories that they gave out, or different awards, and that was to, that was every department that's under the surgical services umbrella, so like PACU, the OR, anesthesia, sterile processing, and we actually had quite a few technicians that won awards during that time. So it was great to have something external where there were awards that were won, but it was also really cool to know that, hey, within our own organization, the work you're doing is being noticed. And I think that's really important to people, and that means a lot. So it was a really cool thing to see people be able to win those things.
Well, congratulations again to you and the department's work, and obviously you think highly of Susan and her leadership and direction. That's going to wrap up for segment number 2. As we mentioned, stay with us for segment number 3. We're going to talk about career advancement, especially Alison's, as she has moved on into a supply chain role within the organization. We've had some conversations on previous shows about moving into other roles in the hospital from sterile processing, targeting mostly infection control, but now we're going to get the supply chain side of the discussion. So stay with us, and we'll be back with Alison Sonstelie. We're back with our third segment with Alison Sonstelie, and this one is going to be a lot about career growth. Hank and I have talked to previous folks on the show about where do people go from sterile processing, often growing within the healthcare institution into other prominent roles. And Alison, you're a great example of that. I wanted to ask you, set the table here for us in segment 3, what prompted the move from sterile processing into supply chain for you?
Well, I guess what prompted me was there was a manager position that opened up within supply chain. And in my previous role in sterile processing, I had worked with different people in supply chain quite a bit. And so, I got exposed to it. And, it was interesting to me. And, I was always open to looking to advance. Not necessarily like I wanted to get out of sterile processing and move to a different department, but it was an avenue for growth that opened up for me. So I applied, and I have to admit it was really hard for me to leave because I did love what I was doing so much. But it was great for me to kind of get out of the nest and go and get that manager experience. So it was really good for me to do that and to kind of spread my wings and venture out forth into the rest of the departments in the hospital.
So, Alison, what did you encounter that was surprising, perhaps, in your transition from the sterile processing world into supply chain? It was just one of the hardest things for me was, like I said, I had been working kind of directly with these people and in supply chain, and now I was working for them. So it was kind of a different transition just in that aspect. And then also, just the role was completely different too, because the department that I was managing was basically like if you took an SPD and just
swapped out the instruments for equipment. So we were still doing all supplies, but now we were doing IV pumps and compression devices and things like that instead of, minor trays. So my customer went from, the OR, which is one group, to the entire hospital. So like the ER, the birth center, ICU, everything. So just getting to know all those managers and getting to know, what all the different equipment was and everything was a great experience. It was also very humbling, but it was something where I just really had to put myself out there and take it head on, and it was great. I had a lot of support from my new leadership, and then also I was still able to fall back because I was still within the hospital that I was working in sterile processing, and was able to go back to my old leadership and ask them for advice now and then too. So it was like I had a really good support structure there.
Yeah, that's great. What in your current role then in the supply chain universe, sitting there knowing your background and knowing your frontline experience in the SPD world, what do you wish that you knew then that you know now as it pertains either to SPD or to supply chain?
I think that especially with building the new hospital and all the different projects that we've undertaken and tried to do, I think being able to better delegate tasks to people was something that I wish I would have learned to do a long time ago, because there's been times, like even now, where I still feel kind of like buried by the amount of work there is to do. And it's not so much just delegating it to people, it's also doing it in such a way where you're also being able to grow those people that are taking on those tasks into leaders. And that's still something that I'm working on being better at, and I'll be working on that until I probably retire. But being able to provide those opportunities for people to learn and for them to become better at what they're doing and to be more engaged is something that I wish I would have learned to do better a long, long time ago. But it's really important, not just for yourself, in a leadership position, but for the people that you are leading.
So you're telling me that delegation is not just, if I don't want to do something, I get someone else to do it?
Exactly. That's
Okay.
exactly it.
No, you're exactly right. That perspective of leadership as also mentorship in the middle of getting stuff done. If it's a project maybe that you could do and you have time to do it, you have the skill set to do it, but then someone's on your team who's coming up in your shadow perhaps, and you can see their skill set, maybe need some refining or just experience. And intentionally setting that aside, taking it off your plate and putting it on theirs, of course, with the right direction and equipping, but so critical for growth and for cultivating a department and a team around you that, as one of my old leaders used to say, he wanted to be able to call in sick one day, not, call in sick, but if you called in sick, that the house is not going to burn down because everybody else knows how to do those kinds of jobs and projects. And if you don't delegate, then you keep your team weak. So absolutely
exactly.
Agree with that. As a supply chain leader then, how has your SPD background equipped you maybe with a different perspective than some of your supply chain counterparts who have never seen the inside of sterile processing or perhaps never had the OR as a direct customer?
Right. I think one of the biggest things I learned in my past role in SPD was the the appreciation for doing continuous improvement, and then also the importance of how processes affect things and how having the right process will get you the right results. And I don't know if it's obviously not just something that's I learned from being in SPD, but that was something I learned in the SPD that I started in. And another thing, too, is you get to see in a really exaggerated way the different relationships that play out within the hospital. So, you've got the surgeon who is like the big cheese on campus, and then you've got all these people that are trying to make them happy, and then on the periphery you have the SPD department that is trying to serve the people that are trying to make the surgeon happy. So you get that whole giant spectrum in that one place. So when you go outside into the hospital, then you can kind of see it's not quite as exaggerated. There's still those different relationships, but you have an appreciation for them that you might not have had if you just started, somewhere else in the hospital.
I want to throw out here for the surgeons who may be listening, even if Alison does not think that you're a big cheese, I think you're a big cheese. Just kidding. Well, I want to make sure, because we're talking in this segment with your role now, speaking maybe to sterile processing professionals who say, yeah, for whatever reason, they're looking for their growth and not into the OR necessarily, not into sterile processing leadership, but they want to go into supply chain. How would you encourage those frontline sterile processing professionals who want to get there to begin preparing themselves today to be competitive when those opportunities become available?
Right. So one of the first things I would do is I would really I'd start to pay attention to, how are supplies getting in and out of your facility. And it's hard with SPD because, everyone does different things. So like some people just do instruments. Some departments do a whole case cart and, other supply locations that they provide to the OR. So for those of you that do interact with supplies, start really paying attention to that flow and how things work and what processes work as far as getting product to the customer, what processes don't, how can you make things more efficient, things like that, because it really is fascinating once you actually dive into it. And when you think about it, cases can be just as easily delayed by a missing supply as they can by a missing instrument. So the role that these supplies play in these cases is really important, and being able to get them on site and be ready and available when they're needed and where they're needed is really important. Also, the ARM organization, they have local chapters, so if you have one, try to get involved in that, because again, a lot of it does overlap, and you'll see a lot of the same reps when you go to the shows that you see at like the ISHM chapter shows. But just try to get involved in that and try to get a bigger perspective on all the different things that happen within supply chain. And I know I'm currently studying to get my CMRP certification through ARM, and one of the main reasons I'm doing that is because, I have a lot of experience on the operations side of supply chain, but I really, I don't know a lot about contracting and purchasing and things like that. So I'd like to be more well-rounded as far as that goes. But there are, ARM does offer certifications.
You just read my mind. I sent Hank a little message and I said, I'm going to go to certification. I'm going to squeeze an extra question in here. And there must have been something we were talking about that just queued that right up. I have my CMRP and can definitely link you to some study resources that'll help you as well. But I think greatly of getting certifications, and I think your advice is spot on. Getting involved with the local ARM chapter. ARM, for the listeners who don't know, stands for the Association for Healthcare Resource and Materials Management. So when Alison said she put and this was in segment 1, when she put the in Isham, there is another it's just in ARM, and it's kind of been one of those funny things because materials managers really have gravitated more towards ARM, but both organizations have the materials management connection. And that tees up some other questions, a couple of closers for segment 3. Before I do that, though, I wanted to ask you, Alison, about certification. Such a strong push in sterile processing, right, to try to get state to require certification. And we actually have another interview coming up all about that and how there have been different ways in gaining statewide support, state level support on that. But do you see the same push for certification with ARM that you did maybe with sterile processing?
No, I don't see that. I think the people that I know that have gotten it have been people that were really trying to just better themselves and, add that extra certification, make themselves more marketable. And, I haven't, and part of that maybe is because I don't know of a facility where they require you to have that certification, in order to advance or to get hired, but I have seen that with the CRCST certification. So I think the CMRP certification is a little bit more rare, at least from what I've seen. But I still think it's important, and again, just to develop yourself and to make yourself more desirable to employers and make yourself more versatile. So it's certainly not something that my organization requires, but I'd like to do it just again so I can learn more about contracting and purchasing and find out things that I may not have been aware of, and just to advance myself.
Yeah, I think that's really wise, and I come from a nursing background, moved into sales, but I obviously had a lot of clinical experience, and the reason I got involved with ARM was when I moved into that world of sales, I knew that I needed to be able to talk the supply chain language, and I needed to understand that, and the only way was to go and get involved, and it's very similar for you coming from sterile processing, that clinical side, that more clinical approach, learning some of the other aspects. You will find on the CMRP exam that there is some questions about sterile processing that'll be easier for you than a lot of people who sit for that exam who never even touch sterile processing. And in that vein, you mentioned in the second segment that your department did not report to the OR, but we often see this bouncing of CS or SPD between materials management and the OR or surgical services in the hospital's organizational structure. And I wonder what your thought was, or what your thoughts are around that, especially with the increasing complexity of medical devices. Because on the one hand, reporting to the OR does cause sort of this hierarchical structure that sometimes makes it hard for sterile processing to advocate for what they know and their specialty, and at the same time, sometimes reporting to supply chain winds up getting that clinical information sort of disconnected. So what are your thoughts on reporting structure and some of the challenges? Because I've always felt like sterile processing really should be almost the link between supply chain and the OR.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I feel like, that is something we encounter is we do have people, we talk to people, some of them do report up through supply chain, some report up through surgical services. We, in our organization, we had maybe, I think it was like 10, 15 years ago, the department that I manage now and SPD were actually together, and they reported up through supply chain. And we actually ended up splitting the department up into two different departments. And the SPD ended up reporting up through surgical services. And it's been really beneficial because you're right, you do get that clinical piece, and there is, I feel like there's a little bit more of a sense of urgency when it's with the OR than it is with supply chain, just because you have those different cultural things at play. But I also think it's very important that SPD doesn't report up directly to the OR, because then I think it ends up where the SPD becomes more subservient and they get stifled and they can't really do new things or try doing things a different way, because they're always going to be kind of, I don't want to say oppressed, that's not really the right word, but I kind of think you guys know where I'm going, where you get kind of stifled and you can't really grow on your own. So the way we have it in ours is the OR director and the sterile processing director are their peers, and they report up to the same person. And it's been really helpful for us as far as making sure that we're partners and we're equals, and we're not just there to serve the OR. Yes, they're a customer, but they are also our partner, instead of just us doing whatever they tell us to do.
Yeah, that partnership and that mentality around the partnership is extremely, extremely important. I think it can't be emphasized enough. And you really did answer my last question, because I've always thought about that, like when I talked about it being a bridge between supply chain and the OR. And you've already answered this, but I'm just going to phrase it this way. Do you think SPD should be lateral to the OR and materials in the organizational structure? Obviously, your answer is yes, because you're already doing it today. And I always looked at it like they should go to the same VP, right? So in your case, surgical services. So OR and SPD report to the VP of surgical services or the director of surgical services, whatever the title is in your organization. But I think that's key. We still have this little gap with supply chain, though, and typically you see the clinical people go up that one path and supply chain goes the other. How do you get in your role, and this will be the last question, how do you get in your role to pull that supply chain piece over and be part of the discussion with the OR director and SPD director that are reporting up to surgical services? How do you pull them into the fold?
Right. So I think one thing that we're doing here that's helped do that is we have, Sterile Processing Department manages all the transactions that take place in the warehouse. But what we have is we have a supply chain person that's kind of implanted into our department that does their role is basically to just get product on the shelf and go do all the value analysis stuff and make sure that the OR and SPD have what they need in order to get the cases done. So we've done some work operationally to make it more like a three-legged stool instead of just like, the OR and SPD, and then supply chain just kind of interjects here and there when they're needed. So we do have more of a enhanced supply chain role within our operating room. Now, I think our next step is we do have some materials people that report up through the OR, like they're OR people. If we can just get them more directly interacting with the supply chain inventory people, I think then, that would be like the grand slam of getting everyone on the same page and making sure everyone's getting what they need when they need it. So, I mean, we've done some work to make sure that supply chain has a very active role in the OR.
Yeah, I think that's a real critical part. Maybe there's an OR materials management. It's just funny. It's so organizational structures, when you look at them, they can be so challenging because you want them to be inclusive and encouraging of those partnerships, and at the same time, you also want accountability. And so you need this like framework to go a certain way so that somebody is accountable to somebody, but at the same time, you have all these lateral relationships that pull together as a team to get things done, and that is a challenge.
Right, and I think also too, like, no one wants to completely give up control of something that they've owned in the past either. So there's always like a little bit of clinging on to, you know, this is what I've been doing and I don't want to give it up. So if, you know, getting people to just let go and trust that, you know, doing things a new way might be better is really, really hard.
I couldn't agree more. Alison, this has been a fantastic interview, and I know we told you offline you did a great job, but you really did. I appreciate you giving us some time to talk with Hank and I, and you know, I'll let Hank thank you as well. But we'll definitely look forward to having you on again in the future as you kind of grow in your supply chain role. I think having you on again to talk about maybe some success stories and working with these other departments. And one thing I can think of is, even though you're working more with equipment, I'm sure that you are discovering things in other departments that you weren't exposed to that relate very much to the infection control aspects of your role in sterile processing, that you're sort of noticing different practices in, so maybe more of the clinics and outlying areas that don't always engage so closely with sterile processing. So maybe we'll circle back with you again in the future on that kind of a topic.
Yes, for sure. I work directly with infection control quite a bit in my role here. So, yeah.
I want to jump in too, Alison, and just thank you, and I guess summarize from the short conversation that y'all had on the certification topic in ARM. It sounds like they need an advocate to be pressing for some mandatory certification, possibly. So if you needed anything else to focus on, there you go.
Right.
But no, thanks again. You did a terrific job, and I know a lot of our listeners are going to be able to walk away with some good ideas and points here for career growth. So thank you for your time.
That's great. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
This week, speaking with Alison Sonstelie. Hank, she was great. And I know for the listeners that stayed with us for all three segments, we covered a wide variety of topics, mostly her career path in sterile processing, obviously the awards, SPD Department of the Year and the Confidence Builder Award, given in 2014 for the calendar year, or essentially 2013. And then finally, another person that we talked to about growing beyond sterile processing in their career, moving over to supply chain and talking about, you know, I thought it most interestingly was the certification aspects of that, because I don't see as strong of a push in ARM and materials management as we have seen in sterile processing. So here's an instance where we are seeing sterile processing professionals really drive the train or drive the bus, or whatever you want to use there, towards certification, career advancement, growth development. Nursing has a lot of continuing education units that have to be obtained just to manage licensure, but sterile processing has done a nice thing with the CRCST and continuing your education. So a lot of themes that overlap regardless of your role in a healthcare institution.
Yeah, particularly regarding that certification question, I thought Alison had a great line in there on a surgical case can be delayed just as easily if you're missing a supply as it can if you're missing instrumentation. And so keeping that bind together with the clinical side between materials and clinical, and understanding, as you mentioned, the importance of continuing education in that. And as we talked about with her career growth and her career path up through sterile processing into the supply chain, having those credentials to differentiate yourself from the other competitive applicants out there is huge. So I I totally agreed with her perspective on that. And as I threw out the challenge to her at the end, I think someone on the arm side and just on materials management should start leading that charge. And not to say that the answer is always regulate, and require, but at the very least lead the charge for understanding of the importance of these credentials and why just having experience alone may not get you exposed to all the ideas and opportunities for improvement that are out there. So had a fantastic time with her, and as you mentioned, we're definitely going to have her back for additional topics.
You know, another interesting thing for people that are either in management or any kind of leadership role, or maybe even not, maybe just a technician in the department, she really made a fantastic point. As people are working with supply chain, keep in mind some things that she shared with you, because it's always helpful to have some empathy and understand where somebody else is coming from. That was a great question that you developed for this interview, which was about her transition to supply chain and how smooth it was. Now, it was interesting to hear her say that it was almost a little difficult because she was used to working with supply chain and then she was working for. But I think the biggest thing was the change in her role. She went from really having one internal customer in the organization being the OR to all of a sudden having all these different customers throughout the organization. And I think that's an important thing to take home from this interview as you work with with supply chain as a sterile processing professional, no matter the role, is to consider the fact that you work oftentimes in one system with a limited number of internal customers, and supply chain serves many masters within the organization, so to speak. They're trying to support the day-to-day operations of all these different departments, and their perspectives are not just influenced by surgical services, but all these other services that are provided oftentimes as well. And so if they don't come from sterile processing or the OR and had that sort of clinical experience like Alison has, they're not always certain how to relate. They might have been somebody who came out of pharmacy and moved into supply chain. And so infection control is really a they're just not engaged in that in their experience as they grew from one role into another. So always keep that in mind as well.
That's a great point. And as you mentioned in the interview with her, this is just another career path, as we discussed with Mike Matthews previously, with the opportunity to grow out of sterile processing into infection control prevention. Now with Alison, she gives a great model for us and a pathway, if you will, to what it looks like to grow out of sterile processing into supply chain. And you're taking that skill set with you, as you said, that perspective, the clinical perspective, and importance there. I wanted to bring up our question that we pitched to her about just preparing yourself as a current sterile processing professional wanting to grow perhaps into supply chain materials management. I know as a current sterile processing leader, it can be easy sometimes to rely on those experts over there to tell me what the contract says or to tell me how to deal with this purchasing challenge. If you can take it upon yourself today in your current role, whatever that is, frontline tech, supervisor, manager, director in sterile processing, but read that contract. See if you can get a hold of it and just read what it says and understand why, how small changes to that can drive a lot of cost savings for your department. And as a leader, if you can build that into your goals for the year to improve your repair contracts, for instance, that goes a long way in building a case for someone who's competent in your current role, even though you're not necessarily responsible for contracts, that you can handle them, you can read them, you can improve upon them, and then when you get that opportunity to throw your hat in the ring for something in supply chain, you're that much more prepared. So I was glad that she brought that up as well.
Yeah, and even as we throw back to some earlier segments, I think a takeaway from segment number 1 was talking about how well the department she was in was organized, having 4 different levels of technician positions plus multiple supervisor and manager roles, was a real clear professional growth plan and opportunity there, and the 30, 60, 90 follow-up after hire to make sure you've gotten the resources. And also from that segment, a reminder to everybody that if you do reside in North Dakota and you want to go to the new Isham Chapter meeting, it'll be September 23rd in Fargo. From segment 2, I think the other thing that was really interesting, talking about how they won the Department of the Year award from HPN, there were a couple of takeaways in there, but mostly this conversation that will always be present, I think, in our interviews, but the way that they utilized data to help move people in the department or out of the department, helping present them with a case or justification that helps them move beyond their resistance to change. It's kind of a, if I can do it, you can do it, and here's the proof that we did it. That is so important when you're trying to do any or put in any kind of institutional change.
Yeah, and not only did they do it, but they did it, in this case, manually. And so I hope that's an inspiration, for facilities out there who are behind the 8 ball, if you will, in terms of just access to technology. Maybe it's not in your budget this year to get an instrument tracking system or other kind of data metric gathering. But that doesn't mean that you can't improve and that you can't utilize a manual documentation system to build your case. Never get in the mindset of it's just a story and I just have to tell my story effectively with a lot of passion. Yeah, passion can get you in the door perhaps, but it's not going to get you what you want at the end of the meeting. That's where the data comes in, and if it's on a spreadsheet or if it's on a piece of paper, that you're tracking throughout the project, either way can tell the story, but you got to get it told from that perspective. So I was glad that she was able to talk us through that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd certainly appreciate a rating and a review because your feedback is important to us. Thank you again for listening to this week's edition of Beyond Clean.